Hey, it's Sylvan, and this is the Handpan podcast. Your handpan. What's it for? And who is it for? Today I sit down with my good friend Dan Mulqueen to talk about handpan playing as a career. It's a story you don't hear often on this podcast, and while you absolutely don't need to turn a hobby into work, it's a path that some choose to pursue and that literally all of us experience in some way. Playing handpan for someone is very different from playing for the sake of self-expression or for therapeutic purposes, for instance. It introduces a whole new set of challenges and rewards, and we get to learn from Dan, who's walked that path. And actually, this conversation, as you'll hear, is very timely. So here we go. Well, Dan, it's been a while. How are you?
It's been a long time, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to chat with you today because I feel like it comes at a very interesting time in your life, and I've got a lot of questions to ask you. So, yeah, I'm excited for our chat.
Yeah, me too, man. It was funny when you asked me to be on. I was like, man, this is like if ever there was time to talk about what I'm doing, I think now is probably it. So,
yeah. So, I mean, tell me what's going on in your world lately.
yeah, man. Well, we were talking online. I mean, it's like the short of it, I guess, is like I was always doing music. I guess for people who don't know, like usually when you're a musician, especially here in the States, you really have to keep like a day job or, something to, sustain yourself. So yeah, I had a day job for like 7 years, in the radio industry. I was a video and audio producer there, and yeah, I like lost my job in like early November. So since then, I mean, it kind of just, I was like waiting to be upset about it. It never really came, and I was like, this is kind of blessing in disguise, I think. I've never been more happy than I am now. Yeah, so I lost the job and then just kind of took all the momentum and kind of just, kept it going. Instead of doing music when I come home every night for 4 hours, I get to do it all day for, 10 or 12 or whatever, whatever it is. So yeah, it's good, man. But yeah, that's kind of the short of it.
Were you planning on going full-time anyways?
Yeah, so that was my plan eventually. But, it's kind of like you could plan, especially with like a big, life change like that. Like there's never going to be like an opportune time to do it. It's kind of like you always have, like there's always going to be kind of like a leap that needs to be made. So this kind of happening was, it was kind of like it forced my hand a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was strictly for budget reasons why I got let go. So it's not like there's any like blips on my, hey, this guy was a jerk or he punched the HR lady. There was nothing like that. Yeah. It's like it was strictly budget. So, yeah, it's kind of looking at it as like a little, like a forced hand type situation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's surely a significant event, and there's something you wrote to me as we were planning this conversation that I kind of want to go back to and touch on. You said, I'm really going at this music stuff like my career. And there's a lot to unpack there. And maybe the question would be like, when did that shift happen from a hobby to a career? It sounds like it happened before you were let go.
Yeah.
What are some of the events that kind of put you on this trajectory?
Yeah, and we've known each other for a long time, and think you have kind of an idea of how kind of crazy I get sometimes with like things being a certain way and like to a standard that I set for myself. But with the professionalism part of it, it's like I was kind of forced to do it because keeping a regular 40 to 50 hour week, whatever, sometimes more. Time is not exactly like free. So. If I work let's say a 10-hour day, like when I come home, it's like, okay, well, you have to eat. So plan, 45 minutes to eat, let's plan 30 minutes for technical practice. Let's plan, 2 hours for composition practice, an hour for, producing, whatever music you're working on. So in that sense, like the scheduling and kind of keeping myself to it, I've been kind of doing it that way since I can remember. Kind of like setting time and sticking to it, just out of necessity. But kind of, yeah, what I meant, like when we were talking, was kind of like, when you're at a, career or any sort of job or whatever, there's a certain, you show up every day at, at the time you're supposed to, you have a list of goals for that day or the week or whatever. And so there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on. So kind of putting timelines on things and going at them, real professionally, but also still like a lot of fun, but just kind of having a sense of, I'm not just winging it. It's not just like, oh, this will come out whenever it does, or, I hope such and such happens. Like, no, man, like you kind of have to make that stuff happen and really have a plan for it to happen, for some of it anyway. So
right. Yeah, and when you have a job, you show up at 8 a.m., every weekday,
yeah,
whether you feel like it or not. And if we only play music when we feel like it, we don't necessarily build the habit that produces the results that we're looking for.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, to sort of plan ahead and set deadlines and set up goals.
Yeah, and it's, I was, the thing that I tell, like when, some people have reached out, oh man, how's it going, blah, blah, and it's like, it's, at one point, it's like really, it's kind of cool to be like, any, like, it's a little scary because it's like, well, bad things could happen, and you could fall on your face. Sure, that's with anything. But, kind of like when you're self-employed or just, whatever it might be, like now anything good that happens or anything bad that happens kind of all falls on me. So it's like there's no like, so-and-so is so hard to work with, or such and such is a horrible thing to do at work, or blah, blah. It's like, well, if I don't like something that I'm doing, then let's change it because that's not good. Like it's kind of all falls on me now. So it's, there's no like safety net, it's like, if it goes bad, it's my fault,
Yeah, that's true. And on the upside, you get to make executive decisions.
Yeah.
And I think we, under the model of a corporate job, we're so detached from what it looks like to make decisions.
Yeah.
That it's a huge transition. It can be totally liberating. A little bit confusing too, because I remember it took me some time to really take ownership of that.
Yeah.
And stop looking at others' approval, or stop comparing myself, because now I had the freedom to create my own recipe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense, man. And like kind of to go back on it too, it's like it's all in the mindset of it too. I guess it's just like, hey, listen, this is happening, and it's, it's your responsibility now. And I think that was a big hurdle to get over. And I think for me, I kind of started to get over that hurdle of it. Like I would say probably 2 years ago, when I started to get invited to do the festivals and shows and whatever, because, I had I was like, I was kind of mentally prepared to lose my job before it actually happened, just because, you take off so much time, and, like I would be lying if I said, when I was there, my head was never really there. I was always like, man, last night at 3 a.m. I really hit a stride, and then I was up at 7 to go to work, and it's like, my head was still at the studio back home, and it's not like I was a bad employee, but I was certainly ready for them to be like, hey, listen, man, something's you can't take 2 months off anymore. You can't, you can't, be daydreaming or whatever. Like, I got the work done for sure, but it was just like, I was certainly not like as engaged as I was, 3 years ago or, before that. So.
Yeah, and I think what I like about that statement, about making this music stuff your career, is that you are more committed to your craft, to your music, than you were to your day job. Like, you're more experienced at it. You've done more networking in that space. Like, if we looked at it purely from a human resources perspective, I feel like someone would tell you, dude, you've set up your life to be a full-time musician. This is what you've invested the most of your life in. This is what will return on investment, as opposed to kind of coasting on this compromise.
Yeah. And it was kind of cool because, like, in the beginning, like when I was, because I got hired at my job kind of right out of college, so it was kind of my loose plan to not be, obviously when you're 18, you have no idea what you want to do, but I was like, I didn't want to make music my full-time thing because I was really worried about, if it's my job, it'd be stressful and you kind of grow to hate it. And I just loved it so much that I didn't really want to put that strain on there. So my idea, I was like, all right, well, I don't want to be playing all the time, but how can I be really close to the action and kind of build these tools that are going to help me in the music industry. So that's kind of where I came into like the video production, audio production. And then when the radio element came in, it was like, well, now you still get to do all this production stuff, but you also get to interact with people from the labels and, booking managers and touring managers and all these people, and you get to see how it's done at a very, very high level. So, there's experiences and conversations that I've heard. I'm like, man, this is like a college course, they're talking because we're coworkers, but I'm hearing it as somebody who's, like in class. I'm like, man, if they're doing it this way, then this is the standard. This is how everyone's doing it. This is how I need to do it. Even if I'm not signed, if I'm not, touring the world or whatever, this is how I want to compose myself and get stuff done. So I took a lot away from that. I like the industry. Just for right now, I think, I couldn't, like, when the news came to, like, hey, you're no longer hired here. It's like taking another interview to go to a different company was just like the most unattractive thing at the moment. It was just not right.
I've used the illustration before. Everyone's got a story, but not everyone gives a TED Talk. Everyone's got a story, but not everyone does public speaking. Yeah. And within the context of the handpan, in this community, everyone plays the handpan, but not everyone does shows.
Right.
What's been your motivation to perform, to put your music out there?
Man, I for a long time, like I put my first album out in like 2014, but I've been playing since 2009. So I think for me, the reason that I keep performing is because I actually feel like I'm bringing something to the table. Whereas like the first 6 or 7 years, I was, full, like, just learn only mode and stay closed door and kind of work on your craft, where, now I'm still, learning every day and trying to improve every day. But it's like now I feel like when I perform, it's like I actually have something to bring an audience and something to kind of show for all of my years. You know what I mean? It's like motivation to do it. I don't know where it comes from, I guess, originally, but the reason to like keep doing it is because I do the shows. I just kind of feel like I'm, like it's all your practice at home. It's just kind of like on steroids. Like it's that much more intense, and, try not to mess it up and try to get perform these songs the best that you wrote them. I think it's a really powerful experience to do, and especially in front of people, whether it's 10 or 10,000. It's kind of the don't screw up factor, the remember remember all your parts, and actually try to give people something to walk away with. I think for me is kind of addicting.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and I'm really glad that you are confident in the value that you're creating, because it takes a lot of humility and courage to say, here's something I've made. It's good. I want to share it with you. Right. That's risky.
Yeah.
It's safer to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a realization I had some time ago. It is more than just playing out of self-expression. Um, there's a whole set of practices and disciplines that comes with uh, creating something for someone as opposed to just yourself.
Right.
So when I see you play, when I hear you perform, and I've had the chance to see you live, a number of times, and I see you flying over that amazing riff or fill or that crazy beat, I see that in the moment. It's kind of like watching Michael Jordan fly in the air, and it's amazing. I mean, you're really creating some magic on stage.
Thanks, man.
But what you don't see in that moment is the hundreds, if not thousands of hours practicing at home away from the spotlights.
Yeah.
Tell me about kind of that dualism between the attention and the performance, but also the kind of the grueling rehearsal at home.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, that's part, it's like we were talking before, like the job, like that's part of the job, it's like you should, like, I don't think the audience should see your, like, oh, that guy's been, like if I'm on stage with something, it's very rare that I'm doing something that I'm not totally comfortable with. It's like, I don't ever want to get on stage and give like, like my B effort, like whenever I go up there, it's like this stuff has been, washed out. The riffs have been, worked over. The fills have been, that's where they are. Obviously there's room for improvisation, but it's like when I'm on stage, it's kind of like, it's like a show and tell. It's like, I don't like, I pull the curtain back a lot, like with what I'm working on and stuff, like especially in videos and on social media. But when it comes time to actually play, I don't want it to be like, oh, that's something that's totally new. Maybe that's not quite ready yet, or it's like, if that's coming, if it's here, then you should be ready to play it and at a, passable level, and, we, as performers, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not, not that crazy with it, but it's just, my mindset going into it is kind of like, yeah, you do your 100 hours and your 1,000 hours, and, don't expect anyone to give you credit for it, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to show up ready and prepared. You're supposed to show up with stuff that's intriguing. So if you don't do that, then it's not going to be, for you and for the audience, it's just not going to be a pleasurable experience. It's like, I'd much rather, do one show every 3 weeks and be super, super ready for it than, one show a night and just give like mediocre or like, not quite ready performances. But that's, it's just kind of how I approach it. And I'm kind of crazy about stuff like that just because I put so much time in. But yeah, that's kind of like, for me, it's never been about like, let's show people that like I've done, however many hundreds of hours of practice. Like I want them to really understand how hard I worked and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, if you just play good and, have compositions that are kind of exciting and, things that leave a crowd entertained, then that's not even a factor. Then it just, hey, that was a good show. That's kind of what it boils down to. That's kind of, the tip of the iceberg, and then everything under the water, that's what you do at home. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. And I like that you have clarity over this, because creating a good show is not accidental.
Yeah.
It probably rarely is. There might be prodigies that can just improvise.
Right. Yeah.
But what you're doing is creating an experience.
Right.
Especially today, I feel like in our connected world of on-demand content, I don't really like the word content, on-demand art. Why do people show up to a concert? And I think that it's to experience something in the here and now.
Yeah.
But a concert is deeply experiential.
Yeah.
It's something you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I would argue, like, I'm just fascinated about this theme of the stage, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is kind of a half-baked thought, but bear with me. I think it'll make sense.
Okay.
I would make the case that the stage is a supernatural setting. And what I mean by that is, if we think about it, first, you're elevated. You're literally on a pedestal, like you're higher. Second, the lights. So if you and I walk down the street outside, the sun hits us from a specific angle, and that's it. There's natural light. On a stage, you have multiple suns shining at you in different colors, and so it's this bigger than, it's like Photoshop on a real physical object
Right.
in real time. And then third, I would argue, microphones. Neither the human voice nor our musical instruments are capable of projecting sound to these large audiences or these big spaces. And so amplification creates a bigger than life, a more than natural, a supernatural experience. And which, by the way, interestingly, I think in our modern world, all of that, the magic of the stage can be abused. Like you look at like totalitarian dictatorships that use that powerful, compelling experience to indoctrinate people. You know, broadcasting the leader's face on a giant screen,
Right.
this bigger than life,
Yeah.
supernatural experience. But when applied to the arts, this powerful, compelling experience, it adds to the magic. And man, it's worth doing. And I know recently you've had some really cool experiences performing on amazing stages. And I was wondering if you had like memorable times that come to mind when you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like to kind of jump off what you said. I mean, like a lot of that stuff, like keeping it in check. It's like, yeah, like there are stages where it's actually off the ground and there are lights, and you know, if you get lucky, there might even be more than 4 people in the audience. But there's also a lot of shows that are not like that, and that's a kind of like you know, when you're young in music and stuff, it's like you can get on those, you know, in front of, you know, your aunt, your uncle, and 3 of your friends, and that's your show. But I think when you put more time into it and sort of like put the content out there, more people are going to be interested. So it's like you kind of have to cut your teeth on those ones that are not so, you know, you're not so, you know, totalitarian with your face on the billboard type. Like, thanks for, that's my stage plot for the next tour, by the way. It's just going to be huge busts of my headshot.
Yes.
No. But no, man, I just think it's like, it's interesting because, you know, that's kind of, you know, the image that you painted with microphones and stuff, like that is like a level to it. You know, you have to work to get to even there. So my whole thing about being prepared is like, if you're lucky enough to be on a stage with lights and microphones and an audience, like you better have something to say or something to show for it, because there's a lot of rungs underneath that ladder that are just a room with no mic, and you know, people who are, it's next door to a bar and the bar's not open for another 45 minutes and they're just looking for somewhere to hang out, you know? Like, so I think for me, it's always been kind of like, if you're on that stage, it's not by accident, and you shouldn't treat it, you know, like you don't care about it, because you should.
Playing for someone, it's risky, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
But we are relational beings, whether we're extroverts or introverts, and most people's relationship to music is to experience it.
Right.
So there's something kind of universal, but also extraordinary about sharing your music.
Yeah.
For people to experience your art.
Yeah, and I think there's different, like, it's almost like, it's not like an expectation, but it's more of like a style thing. So it's like, you know, there's plenty of people that put on great shows and they don't compose. They will improvise and create something live on the spot. And the audience loves it. They love it. And I think that's cool too. I'm a fan of that stuff as well. But I think when you have, when you take years to build yourself up on a certain thing, like I love compositions and really precise stuff. Like I want it to be close to the record. That's just how I approach this my shows. Like, but I think there, like how you were just saying, like there's a space for if people are into live improvised music, that's still great, sure. But I think if you're like, oh, Dan's up next, like if I were to sit down and say, here's 20 minutes of something improvised, it'd be like, well, that's off character, like that's not how, that's kind of not what that's not what I do, that's just not my thinking toward it.
Yeah, and I think there's a setting for each type of play.
Yeah, 100%.
That's why having jams is a great thing. Jamming around the campfire is awesome.
Yeah.
But you probably don't play the same way in front of an audience.
No. You certainly don't do your compositions at a campfire. You don't want to be that guy. Everyone listen to me.
Yeah. Okay, so right now you're in this phase of essentially becoming a professional, approaching this music thing as a career.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What does it mean for 2020, for instance?
Yeah. So 2020 for me is kind of like it's a new album year, a U.S. touring year. I'll be in Japan is how it looks for right now. I'll be back in Europe. Maybe a second, like a re-release, not release, but a different version of the album I'm going to put out early in the year. So yeah, there's like a lot of like milestones that I want to hit in the year. And it's kind of like now is, I had these plans that would have been like, 2020/2021 because I was doing it with the other career, I've kind of mentally, when people ask me like what I do, I've always said, musician first, it's like the only thing that I've ever really been, like the radio job and stuff was great. It served its purpose and I learned a lot and all that stuff. But the only thing that I've, it seems like the only thing that I've ever really enjoyed talking about, or thought, hey, this is something actually worth talking about has been the music. So it's kind of all those plans for the next 2 years, I've kind of consolidated into the next, 6 months because I just have the time now. And it's like, my thinking is if I've done all that I've done so far, and it's not like I'm looking back proud, it's just like, I'm looking back like, okay, well, you've managed to put out, 3 records and tour here, and here. And that was with the other thing. So now if you don't have the other thing, and you keep that same kind of intensity, you can get a lot more done and have a lot more cool stuff, happen if you make it happen. So, 2020, the main thing, to get back to your question, is kind of, the main thing is the album. It's kind of like if I miss my deadlines, which I have them taped to the side of my computer monitor as like a reminder of like, stop watching those YouTube videos and get back to work. But, like as long as I hit, that's kind of the main thing, is the album early next year. And then, an East Coast tour, doing a couple of things on the West Coast. And then I'm back here for maybe like a month, which in that month I want to drop like a second project, and then it'll be Japan, hopefully Europe, back over to the UK. And so, yeah, man, it's just a lot, and it's all riding, I feel like, on the next, really like 6 or 7 weeks to finish this album. But yeah, I mean, that's, I feel like I'm saying it more for me to be like, okay, album, like stop procrastinating this and get it done. But, yeah, so a lot of stuff, man. It's kind of, to tie it back to the first thing of like keeping it, professional. It's like, it sounds like a lot if you say it like in the same sentence and back to back and all this stuff. But, there's 12 months in a year, it's like, if you're going to do this full time, you should fill those months. And, I don't want to just be like, oh, I made my rent for this month, so I guess I'll just chill now. Like I've never really relaxed with it ever. So, and again, that was with the job. So, why relax with it now? Just keep up the intensity, keep up the, creative flow of it all, and just kind of keep it moving. That's kind of how I operate.
Yeah. Do you expect your relationship to the handpan to change as you take this thing full time and make it a professional pursuit?
I don't know. I would like to think not. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's going to change for sure. But I don't think it's going to. I hope anyway. It's not going to be any like resentment or whatever. Like now it's like when I'm, I have it in my schedule. It's like, okay, the days of the week where it's, 3 hours, 4 hours, really intense technical practice, like no composition, just straight technical stuff. I'm like, if there's one thing that would be like the equivalent of like, doing like an Excel sheet for 3 hours, at work, that's maintenance, that's what you have to do. It's like, if there's one thing that's going to get annoying or tiring, it would be that, I think. But for me, it was like, man, sweet. I get to wake up and it's technical practice. And then I have lunch and then I go back to composing or, it's just like, it's the stuff that I'm really excited for. So I mean, I hope it doesn't change too much. Because I think where I'm at with it now is really kind of comfortable, and it's, there's like a certain intensity that's there, but it's also like, it's more of like how exciting this is that I get to like, play all these beautiful instruments and, share them with all these awesome people. And, I think that, I hope that doesn't ever go away, and I don't think it will, but yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I know certain drummers that tour like full time. They're like, man, the last thing I want to do when I'm home is, do paradiddles or like, if I hear a click track for the next, if I don't hear a click track till the next tour, I'll be fine with that, but, so I hope that doesn't happen. I sincerely don't think it will, but, I guess nothing's impossible, right?
Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting because the handpan being still so new, there's not a lot of us in the handpan community, in the loose handpan community, who have made that decision to make it their full-time gig.
What about like for you though? Like when you like now, I mean, you're obviously it's pretty intense for you. I mean, this is everything you're doing, right? Did it change?
Yeah. So, and that's the reason why so much time lapses between podcast episodes. I don't know. I mean, it's a fine line. For me, I try to always reconnect with the original spark, what got me into it in the first place, which, I've coined as the tagline of this podcast being the simple joy of creating. And it's this key word, this phrase that brings me back to my first impressions of the instrument, to a sense of wonder, because handpans are awesome. Yeah. Even just as an object, it's just the coolest thing. The sound they produce. So we should really never get tired of playing them and hearing them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that. I mean, like when, I don't mean to keep going back to it, but when all the news happened with the job and taking this new kind of, approach to the music that I've been doing, it was like, it was also exciting for a couple of days, and I was like, man, this is so great and great and great. And then there's always like that little, if the volume level was turned, it would be at like a 2. And it's just this little voice of like, hey, what if everything fails? And so for me, like what you were just saying, like back to the simple joy of it, it was like, I was so excited to do all this stuff, and I still am. It was just like a momentary whatever. And I had like one of my first SPB, I have this D minor from like 2011, 2012. And I just kind of sat down and like, I have like, I think 12 or 13 handpans here in the studio, and I just put them all back on the rack and just sat down with like a classic D minor, and it was just kind of like this, like, all right, everything's cool, like you're good. Just remember, you get to do music for a living. Like that's so sick, like stop stressing, stop complaining. It's like this is the cool, even if it's just for until you run out of money or fall on your face or whatever, or just don't like it anymore. Like the fact that you even get to do this for this long with this instrument is so cool. So like, put that little voice down to zero and, and just keep going,
Your album Handwriting is phenomenal. I mean, it's just,
Thank you, man.
It's so well produced. I don't know if you worked with a producer to arrange the parts or to
No.
write any
Nope.
of the music. Well, I mean, amazing.
Thank you, man.
It just flows very well, and it's so easy to listen to, which is significant because you're kind of known as the guy who lays down crazy beats.
Well, thanks.
But there are incredibly mellow tracks as well on that record. You've got some software instruments, some beats. You've got vocalists, and I'm assuming other instrumentalists on some tracks. So it's just kind of it blows me away to see like how far Handpan music has gone in just this short time lapse, and also like that I know you, like that we know each other, and
yeah, we've known each other for a long time, man.
yeah. So I think we were first in touch in 2010, 2011.
Yeah, I think so.
I was going to move to New York, and I think we exchanged a few emails saying, "Hey, let's get together."
Yeah.
It never happened because
Nah.
I was totally MIA. This was the year that I had proposed to Jill, so
Excuses.
but yeah, for like a couple of years I totally like disappeared from the face of the world.
No, but I think the first time we actually met was probably in Hangout, I think US, like in 2014, yeah.
Yeah, 2014.
But yeah, we'd known each other for quite a while.
Yeah, it's cool to look back and to see the journey. And so we're all at different points in that journey, and I think there's probably a lot of people listening who are not at that stage. And I would argue they probably don't even need to be, but if they wanted to go there, if they wanted to work hard to create music that will be recorded, that will be performed in front of an audience, what are some tips that have helped you that you would want to share to someone who wants to get started?
That's a good question, man. But I think like the only way to do it, I mean, it's not poetic. It's just to try, just to do it. It's like some of the earliest recordings that I have on Handpan, on drums with whatever bands I was playing and growing up. It was like, they're not good. Like they're just especially the early Handpan stuff. I'm like, this just it just kind of sucks. But it's like, and it's not like to downgrade yourself, but it's just like, man, you have to start somewhere. It's like, if you're running a mile, the first time you run a mile, it's going to be the slowest you ever run it. It's like there's not really a way around it. Or even like to keep it in the Handpan community. Like how many times do you see like a builder whose best instrument is their first one? It's like never. I don't think that's ever happened. Maybe Victor or whatever, SPB. Which no, I'm just kidding. But no, man. But I think it's like the easiest way. I don't think there's much like to do except just to try it. And as far as like advice to like get to new levels, I think the levels are kind of just like what you create for yourself. I mean, how somebody like their goal might be like, listen, in 1 year I'm gonna play at an open mic in my town. For them on the ladder, that's rung 10. Like that's their goal. It's just like, I think the worst thing you can do, especially in a community like ours, is compare yourself to other people, because it's so small. And it's just like, you need to try to, just if there's ever been a genre or like a time to like not stay in your lane, like to, but create your own lane and kind of do your own stuff at your own pace. I think like, because now it's like there's not really like a, we don't have a, the Beatles. Like there's no Led Zeppelin in our genre. Everybody's kind of like, you're kind of making your own path with it. Like there's no, like there's not really a standard. So, whether you're playing in yoga studios or coffee shops or, touring the world or whatever, I just think like you just have to kind of set a goal and, work toward it. And whether it's, rung 10 for you and rung 3 for someone else, like all that doesn't matter. It's just kind of like setting out and doing it and, just sticking to your plan. That's, and then as far as recording, I mean, it's especially now, man, it's so easy to record stuff, to record ideas, at least, if nothing else. And, I think just to try it and to actually hear yourself through speakers, it's kind of like, you can kind of tell yourself, I've come this far, or like, oh, I like this song, or I don't like this song. And then you hear it when you're not playing it. And you're like, man, that's really bad, or that's really good. Or like, I didn't expect it to sound so good. So in that sense, I think like my advice would just be to like, just do it, just start, even if it's your cell phone and then putting into GarageBand and trying to mix it or whatever, like just to hear yourself and to really get like an outside opinion on it,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing these tips. It'll be encouraging to folks looking to kind of pursue that.
I hope so, man. It's like, it couldn't be easier than now. It's everyone. Your laptop can double as a studio, like probably right now as you listen to this. You just have to download the right program.
Yeah. Well, man, thanks again. I'm going to close us by saying this. And again, it's super simple, but you're a very good player.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you're sharing your art with the world, because it would be a shame if you didn't. And we would miss it if you didn't do it.
Thanks, man.
So keep at it, my friend. And for the record, okay, I've got to clear the air. This is the elephant in the room, this whole conversation.
Oh, no.
I'm very envious of your beard. And yes, if you didn't know, Dan has a big red beard. It's an awesome look. So what about you? What's your handpan for? There's no right or wrong answer here, but if you're ready to share your music, you can step into a whole new world of experiences with your instrument. Playing for someone can be scary, but it might also be the most joy you get out of playing the handpan. I stumbled upon this quote recently that said, "Art isn't art until it's experienced by another." Wow. I don't know what you think, but maybe, just maybe, let's try to play for someone and see how it goes. Or maybe that's not where you're at right now, and that's okay too. In fact, I would argue that even if your music were never heard by anybody else, never recorded, never performed, you would still be better off creating music regularly. If you're interested in checking out Dan's new album, it's coming on March 1st, and you can find all the details at danmulqueen.com or in the show notes at thehandpanpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Handpan Podcast, and talk to you in the next one.